Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1057 just came out, and I, of course, am happy with this chapter for one main reason, which is that Yamato is not joining the crew. As many of you may know, that is something that I've hoped for a long time, and I established a good while back in my videos why I felt it made no sense for Yamato to join the crew unless she went through some major character development, which of course she did not throughout the Wano arc. I will say that while I'm happy with the fact that Yamato, is not joining the Straw Hat crew, the reasons for her not joining the crew do make me roll my eyes a little bit and feel like, okay, she really did not learn anything over the course of this storyline, since she did not exactly grow out of being Kazuki Oden and suddenly realize that, hey, I don't need to follow everything this guy does. Instead, she seemed to have decided that, no, I need to follow everything this guy does, everything this guy did to an absolute T, which means that I have to be quite the stickler. I can't just go out to sea yet. First, I gotta copy the first part of his journey, which was going around the country, and after that, it'll be okay for me to go out to sea. So it's not like she had an epiphany that, hey, maybe I don't need to copy Kazuki Oden completely. It's more so her deciding that she needs to copy him perfectly. And in doing so, that means that she cannot go out to sea yet, because she has to copy the initial stuff Kazuki Oden did as well. So it's like, okay. I will say that you could argue that, hey, she at least had the realization that she is still a naive individual and therefore needs the experience of exploring the country before she's ready to go out to sea. But to that, I would say I would have loved to have seen this moment of character development, this moment of growth, this realization happen on screen. I would have loved to have seen Yamato have some sort of realization about what is the correct thing for her to do on screen, because the last that we saw of her, once the battle was over and everything like that, she was telling the Straw Hat crew, hey, I'm going to be joining. I'll get the okay from Luffy as soon as he's awake or whatever, but I'm going to be joining your crew. So at the end of all of the events of Act 3, the battle with Kaido and Onigashima and everything like that, Yamato was still convinced she's going to join the crew, which means that some point over this, post-battle 1 week, 2 week break or whatever, that is where Yamato off-screen realized, hey, I'm not going to be joining the crew because I had this realization that maybe I should be doing this instead, exploring the country to gain some world experience before I realize that it's ready for me to go out to sea and just sail around with these guys. So that moment of realization, that actual, character writing is sorely missed for Yamato, in my opinion. But we take what we can get. Again, she's not joining the crew, so at the end of the day, that's something that makes me happy. I can live with that. Now, next time we see her, maybe she's learned a lot and maybe she's a changed character. I would love to see that as well. I would really love to see it happen on screen, but, at least get her out of this phase, in my opinion, of just being like, I need to be Kazuki Oden, because at this point, I'm sick and tired of her saying that every other panel. So, that little rant aside, we're happy about that. Happy that happened in this chapter. The big thing that I really liked in this chapter, aside from the Yamato not joining confirmation, is Luffy and Momonosuke's send-off. I thought that was pretty great. I liked the flashbacks we got to, their relationship, because they've had a really great relationship for quite a long time at this point. And the way it's developed with them being initially really antagonistic towards each other, both basically acting like little kids, really like brothers fighting. We'll talk about that in a second. To now, where Momonosuke literally can't bear to see Luffy leave. I love the way that we got this send-off, because Luffy tells Momonosuke that, hey, you're like my little brother now. Luffy's got a little brother at this point, right? The arc begins with us being told that Ace was in Wano first, the brother that Luffy lost. Ace was in Wano before Luffy, and Ace was the one who had promised Tama, I'll come back and get you. He had promised Yamato, hey, I'm going to come back and defeat Kaido and stuff. Ace obviously died. Luffy lost this brother. But now Luffy kind of picks up the role of Ace in a lot of ways. He does a lot of the things that Ace promised that he would do. Taking down Kaido, coming back, all of this stuff. And in a sense, he's the one that's leaving his little brother behind at this point, right? He's the one that's basically played the big brother figure to Momonosuke. And now it's Luffy's turn to leave and Momonosuke's turn to basically wait some, we don't know how long or whatever, but Momonosuke, he has his own mission at this point. He wants to surpass Kazuki Oden. He wants to become stronger. Momonosuke is being left with, this will left behind by Luffy and everything like that. And he's been inspired by Luffy. He's been inspired by his elder brother. So it's just interesting to see sort of like a passing of the torch in that sense. I will say that the coolest part by far, even beyond the little Luffy, Momonosuke and Luffy Ace dynamic, is Luffy finally has his first territory. That's pretty crazy. Luffy finally has his first territory. Wano, right? Fishman Island was floated as potentially being Luffy's first territory, but Wano is the first confirmed territory of Straw Hat Luffy, the Emperor, right? It is actually going to be, Wano country is actually going to be flying the Straw Hat flag, and any country that tries to come over and mess with it is going to be picking a fight with Luffy. That's the first truly Yonko-esque decision that Luffy has ever made. That's his first act as a Yonko, essentially. So I think that that is awesome. I would love to see, flags being shipped across to whoever needs it. Send one back to Fishman Island, because they're going to need it soon. Send one back to, I don't know, Dressrosa or something like that. Send one to Alabasta, I don't know. I would love to see Islands be getting some flags. Send Zoe a flag. They can make more flags. Send them some flags. That is by far my favorite part of this chapter. So I'm looking forward to Luffy doing more Yonko-esque acts in the future. I would love to see him actually sending some Marines running away. That's one thing I don't think we've seen ever Luffy do, which is sending some Marines running away because, he's kind of acting as a deterrent at some point. The way Kaido was a deterrent, as Green Bull said, the way that Shanks was a deterrent, as we actually got to see. I would love to see Luffy actually take that next step and actually act as a deterrent for Marines from entering a territory or messing with some of his friends or something like that. So that's exciting. I'm sure that that's something we'll get in the future, in the near future at some point. But, all the Luffy stuff aside, I think that the one part of the chapter I didn't particularly care for was basically the second half. The second half of the chapter I didn't particularly care for, I guess, because I think overall, this is just going to be personal preference type stuff. I felt like a lot of the narration going on through the play of them recounting the events of the arc, but in a very grandiose manner, it felt just a little too self-congratulatory to me. Just like Oda hyping up or patting himself on the back almost of like, yes, the events of this arc were so magnificent and poetic, and let me just break them all down for the reader one more time. Like, it felt a little self-congratulatory to me, is all I'll say. Maybe if you were more bought in, I guess, to what was being narrated, and you were like, yes, like, maybe this really hit for you. I guess it didn't quite for me. I think where it definitely lost me was once it got to recounting the Hiyori and Orochi scene that we never really got to see, but I can't tell at the moment if that was something that really should have happened or if it was intended to have happened actually in real time, back after Denjiro actually cut down Orochi and then Hiyori was maybe supposed to give a final proclamation or something like that, or if it was always planned to have been saved for this, this play scene. Maybe it was always planned to have been saved for this play scene just because, it feels like a very stage-like dramatic moment, theatrical moment, you could say. At the same time, it is kind of an odd scene, I would say, to end the storyline on, because the Hiyori Orochi, I don't think any of us personally ever felt as though the Hiyori Orochi storyline and really the Kurozumi storyline was like one of the most compelling aspects of the arc, or even really one of the most, like, it really was overshadowed by so much else that was happening, obviously, with Kaido, Big Mom, the Beast, like, that felt like Orochi and his stuff felt like a much smaller part of the conflict as the story went on, at least in my opinion, to the point that at some point it was kind of like, let's just check off this box, get him out of the way, he keeps sticking around, right? He really wasn't that big of a deal for the majority of the arc, right? Once we moved past, I guess, the early Flower Capital stuff. So to me, to end this whole Wano storyline with a big dramatic scene about how the Kozuki have been avenged, and the Kurozumi, now 20 years of this cycle of Kurozumi hate or whatever, and the Kurozumi are born to burn, and that's kind of the final dramatic line. Kurozumi are born to burn, the final dramatic line, I suppose, of the Wano arc. That feels a little odd to me, just because that just never felt like, as time went on in the grand scheme of things, that's maybe not the strongest scene or the most important scene to really end the storyline on. That's kind of just me. I feel like if we'd gotten that, maybe like a full chapter dedicated to Orochi going down or something, that might have been the perfect point to get that sort of a scene. I guess maybe for me, I just never felt like the Kozuki Kurozumi. I think it was a cool concept, the Kozuki and Kurozumi kind of, the tale of those two clans. But I think that it wasn't fleshed out to the point that I personally think that it was quite as beautiful and tragic and poetic as the narration kind of makes it out to be in this chapter. Is this full circle thing of the Kurozumi now being the ones to burn? I don't know. I also think that there is something that you could definitely say to the idea that, sorry, there's some sirens going on outside. there's something that you could definitely say here to the point of, is it right to continue slandering tearing down the Kurozumi name, right? Because that's where this whole thing started from, and it's such a continuous recurring theme in One Piece to not really blame the name, right? Like the Rebecca and everything that we got throughout Dressrosa. Obviously, Luffy and his own family, with Chinja chasing after Luffy for the sins of his grandfather, Ace for the sins of Roger. This is such a recurring idea in One Piece, to not punish others for the sins of others in a given family or lineage or whatever, for the sins of the father, the sins of one. So to have everybody chanting like the Kurozumi were born to burn, I don't think that that's a good look for the future of Wano country. It just feels like it's stepping through that same cycle again. You could say, we went through Odin, I was born to boil, but when they were saying Odin was born to boil, that was actually a moment of praise, right? It was honorable that Odin was born to boil, right? He was born to boil for the sake of everybody else. He's the one that boils while keeping everybody safe. So when everybody's chanting Odin, he was born to boil, that's a really, really cool moment. It's actually everybody sending, I guess you could say, everybody honoring Odin in a way, right? Saying the Kurozumi, so not Orochi was born to burn. It's the Kurozumi clan was born to burn. It's talking about them as though they're charcoal, right? They're born to burn. This is clearly an extremely negative connotation that's going on here. So maybe I'm nitpicking here, but it just feels really odd to me. I think two things. I think odd that the whole storyline of Wano is ending with this scene of Orochi send-off, I guess, being the last really dramatic moment, as though this was the centerpiece of the story that's being focused on, when I personally didn't feel like that was the case. And then two, the messaging just being a little odd, and I feel like conflicting with a lot of what we've learned throughout One Piece up to this point. So overall, first half of the chapter I loved because of the Yamato stuff, her not joining specifically, and secondly, the Luffy Momonosuke situation, and also Luffy making Wano's territory. Second half of the chapter, it's not a big deal. It's just a narration. I mean, it's just the play basically going through the beats of the story and spinning it, in a very, I guess, theatrical Shakespearean manner or whatever, which I wasn't super bought into, but maybe some of you were. And then the last messaging about Hiyori Orochi, I don't know about that exactly, but, it is what it is. So, Wano's over. On to the next stuff. I'll talk to you all next week.